When we think about the American Revolution, our minds usually jump straight to the battles, right? Lexington, Concord, Yorktown. But the real story, the story that actually explains why it all went down, isn't about the big explosion. It's about the long, slow-burning fuse. So let's dive into this century-long story of how two groups of people who were sure they were one and the same drifted so far apart that war became, well, maybe the only way it could end.
So that's the big question, isn't it? Was there some point of no return? Could things have played out differently? Well, to even begin to answer that, we can't just start in the 1770s. We've got to rewind the clock, way back. See, the revolution wasn't this sudden, overnight event. It was more like the final cracking sound of a foundation that had been slowly, quietly weakening for more than 100 years. It's a story of two societies that were basically developing on parallel tracks, just destined to eventually slam into each other. Okay, so to really get what was happening in the colonies, you have to understand the empire they were a part of. And for most of the 18th century, the British Empire was, to put it mildly, distracted. Its relationship with America wasn't really defined by tyranny, not at first. It was defined by something much simpler, just profound neglect. I mean, Britain's focus was crystal clear, and it was not on America. It was locked in one huge, incredibly expensive war after another with its rivals in Europe. These conflicts ate up all its attention, all its money, and all its political energy. What was the result? A truly staggering national debt and pretty much zero bandwidth left to think about some coherent policy for a bunch of colonies an entire ocean away.
And this division was happening right there at home. Britain couldn't even agree with itself on what its empire was supposed to be. On one side, you had the old guard, the Whigs and Tories, who basically saw the empire as a giant piggy bank. Go conquer land, extract resources, and tax everybody to pay for all those wars. But then you had this more radical group, the Patriot Whigs, who had a totally different vision. An empire of trade, with colonies as equal partners, where you grow the whole economy to pay the debt, instead of just taxing it. With that kind of fundamental disagreement, how could you ever have a consistent plan for the colonies? You couldn't.
So all this distraction, all this internal squabbling, it led to a policy, or really a lack of policy, that historians have a great name for: salutary neglect. It wasn't some official plan written down on paper. It was just the reality on the ground. Britain was way too busy to micromanage, so it just left the colonies alone. And in that empty space, something new and really powerful started to grow.
So let's hop across the Atlantic and see what's happening on the other side. While Britain was looking the other way, the colonists were busy filling that power vacuum. They started building their own political world, a world with its own rules and, crucially, its own sense of identity. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. From day one, the colonists saw themselves as 100% British, not as second-class citizens, but as equals. They truly believed they packed the rights of an Englishman in their luggage when they crossed the ocean. This was their fundamental, non-negotiable starting point.
But just watch how that idea starts to change over time. By the 1760s, a guy like James Otis Jr. isn't just arguing for equality anymore. He's hinting at superiority, that the colonists deserve the same rights and, in some respects, to more. I mean, that shows an incredible evolution in American self-confidence. They were starting to believe their hard work and unique situation gave them some kind of special status.
And this wasn't just talk. You could see it happening in their governments. Right from the get-go, every colony set up its own assembly. And these weren't just glorified town councils. Nope. They took on the powers of the British Parliament itself, the power to tax their own people, the power to decide how to spend that money, even the power to pay the salaries of the royal governors. For 100 years, these assemblies were the real, legitimate governments in the eyes of most colonists. And all that time practicing self-rule led to a pretty radical new idea. Samuel Adams just comes right out and says it, calling each colony a separate body politic. Think about what he's saying. He's saying they're not just little branches of Britain. They are distinct political entities, connected to England only through a shared king. This is a universe away from how London saw the situation.
So what's the political software running in the background here? It's an ideology you could call republicanism. Now, in Britain, these ideas were kind of fringe, held by a small opposition party. But in the colonies, they went mainstream. The core belief was simple: power corrupts. And because power always corrupts, you have to watch it constantly, and you need to be deeply suspicious of any centralized authority far away. This mindset basically made the colonists allergic to any perceived power grab from London.
Okay, so you've got this growing political divide.
But at the exact same time, there were two huge intellectual and spiritual movements sweeping through the colonies, and they were giving everyday people the tools to question authority in all parts of their lives. So on one hand, you have the Enlightenment, which is all about reason and logic. Thinkers like John Locke argued that people are born as blank slates and that your station in life is determined by your environment and your education, not by who your parents were. That idea just demolishes the whole concept of a natural-born aristocracy. And then, coming from a totally different angle, you have the Great Awakening. This was a massive wave of religious revival. Preachers like George Whitefield were telling people that their relationship with God was personal and direct. You didn't need a priest or a bishop from some stuffy established church to tell you what to believe.
And here's the kicker, the common thread. One used reason, the other used faith, but they both ended up in the exact same place. They taught the average colonist that they had the right and even the duty to think for themselves, to challenge the old, established institutions, and to take control of their own lives, whether that was their spiritual life or their political one.
Okay, let's put all the pieces together. Over the course of a century, Britain and its American colonies had, almost by accident, become two very, very different worlds, and they were now barreling towards each other on a collision course.
And here is the great, fascinating paradox of the whole thing. In a lot of ways, the colonists were becoming more British, not less. They couldn't get enough of British-made goods, they followed British fashion, they read British books. But, and this is the key, while they were looking more British on the outside, they were thinking less and less like them on the inside. They wanted all the rights of Englishmen, but they were determined to protect those rights through their own local governments.
So by 1763, the stage is perfectly set for a disaster. You've got a colonial population that believes its local assemblies are just as powerful as Parliament. They're armed with powerful new ideas about challenging authority. They've had a century of practice at running their own affairs, and on the other side you have a British Empire, finally done with its wars but drowning in debt, and it's now turning its full attention to the colonies for the first time in forever, not to ask for help, but to demand money. These two worlds had just drifted too far apart. Their politics, their ideas, their very understanding of what their relationship was supposed to be, it was all completely out of sync. That long fuse had been laid down, piece by piece, over 100 years. The only question left was, what spark would finally set it all off?